Let's dive right into a feeling that I think has become, well, pretty much universal. It's the sense that society hasn't just fractured, but that we're not even arguing about opinions anymore. We're arguing about basic facts. It really does feel like the mirror that was supposed to show us one shared reality has just shattered into a million pieces.
I mean, seriously, think about it. Doesn't it feel like the person next door, or someone you work with, or even someone in your own family is operating from a completely different set of facts than you are? If you've ever felt that, you are definitely not alone. There's actually a name for this feeling. It's called sociopolitical vertigo, and it's that dizzying, unsettling sensation that the very ground of truth is shifting right under our feet. This isn't just about politics anymore. It feels like a fundamental crisis in what we can all agree on as real. So, to figure out where this vertigo is coming from, we've got to start with how we build our reality in the first place. To really get a handle on this vertigo, we need to pop the hood and look at the psychological engine that actually builds our reality. And it turns out that engine is way more social than you might think. This brings us to something called shared reality theory. And here's the core idea. Our sense of what's real isn't really a personal thing. It's a social project. A thought or an experience only hardens into a fact for us when the people we trust see it too and nod along. Without that social confirmation, our most deeply held beliefs are as fragile and fleeting as the flicker of a firefly. We actually need other people to make the world feel solid.
Okay, so if we need this shared reality to feel stable, what on earth happened to the one we all supposedly used to have? Well, this is where it gets interesting because that unified past that we all get nostalgic for, it might have been more of an illusion than we realize. That so-called golden age of consensus, the one we sometimes hear about, it wasn't some natural, happy state of affairs. Nope, it was an actively constructed reality. It was a carefully managed social project where some very powerful gatekeepers got to decide what was real and what wasn't.
And if you want a really jarring example of how that consensus was maintained, look no further than this. I mean, wow. In order to create a comfortable, stable narrative for the people in charge, entire realities, horrific realities, had to be completely erased or twisted into something unrecognizable. This wasn't a shared reality, it was a selective one. So here's the bottom line. That old, stable mirror was only stable because a lot of people were never allowed to see their own reflection in it. The consensus was built on a foundation of exclusion. So what changed? What were the forces that finally smashed it to pieces? So what was it that broke this artificial unity? Well, it wasn't just one thing. And spoiler alert, it didn't start with the internet. The cracks in that mirror were showing long, long before we all had a login. You can see it right here on this timeline. The whole process really kicked off decades ago, with social movements demanding that their experiences be seen as valid, as real. The consensus was already fracturing as voices that had been silenced for so long finally forced their way into the conversation. The internet didn't start the fire, it just poured a whole lot of gasoline on it. And underneath all this big social change, there's this really powerful psychological quirk humming away in the background. It's called the saying is believing effect. We all do this. We naturally tweak how we talk about something to better connect with whoever we're talking to. But here's the crazy part. In the process of tweaking our story for them, we end up convincing ourselves that our tweaked version is the absolute 100% truth. And this chart really shows the consequence of that. Back in the day, when the audience was this big, generic mass public, everyone tuned their message toward the center, which helped create that consensus. But today, our audience is a niche tribe. So we tune our message for our fellow partisans. And the result isn't one big reality anymore, but dozens and dozens of smaller, fragmented ones. And, this kind of blows up the simple idea of a filter bubble. Research actually shows we see more opposing views online, not fewer. The problem isn't that we're isolated, it's the way we see those other views, totally stripped of context, of nuance, of any real human connection. And that kind of drive-by hostility doesn't build bridges, it just makes us retreat deeper and deeper into our own psychological fortresses. So if the old consensus was basically a myth, and this new fragmentation is our reality, how are we supposed to live in this world of many worlds, what some people are calling the pluriverse? It's pretty clear the old roadmaps are useless. We're going to need some new tools. The first tool is a concept called standpoint theory, and it basically argues that there is no such thing as a perfectly objective view from nowhere. Every perspective, every piece of knowledge, every fact comes from a particular standpoint in society. Now, this doesn't mean truth doesn't exist. It just means truth is always, always seen from somewhere. And look, this is not a free pass for anything goes relativism. Actually, it demands something way more rigorous than just pretending to be neutral. It calls for something called strong objectivity. And that's the idea that to get closer to the real truth, we have to start by critically examining the standpoints of the most powerful people. The ones who usually get to define what's normal in the first place. The second tool is for our politics. It's called agonistic pluralism. And this theory basically says that conflict and disagreement are permanent and maybe even necessary parts of a healthy democracy. So the goal isn't to create some perfect harmony where we all hold hands and agree. The goal is to figure out how to disagree better. This slide just lays out the core difference perfectly. On one side, you've got antagonism. That's where you see your opponents as enemies, who must be destroyed. But on the other side, you have agonism. You see them as adversaries. You're not trying to destroy them, you're trying to out-argue them. And you do it while fiercely defending their right to be in the game. It completely transforms conflict from a war of eradication into a tough but ongoing debate. So the real goal here is to build a society that's strong enough to actually hold our passionate disagreements without completely shattering. It's all about channeling all that conflict into productive energy, instead of just pretending we can make it all go away. So what does any of this actually look like in a real world? How do we start building a society that can handle this new, messy, fragmented reality? Well, the focus has to shift away from forcing everyone to be the same and toward building smart, intelligent bridges. One of the coolest ideas out there is something called bridging algorithms. Think about it. Right now, social media is designed to maximize engagement, which, let's be honest, usually means maximizing outrage. But what if we designed it to find common ground instead? These are tools that are built specifically to search for those surprising little statements that people from totally different camps can actually agree on. And this isn't science fiction. There's a real-world system used in Taiwan called Polis. First, it just sucks in all the opinions on a tough topic. Then it uses AI to map out who believes what. But here's the magic trick. It then hunts for and highlights the ideas that get support from people across these different groups. It doesn't try to force consensus. It just reveals the consensus that was already there, hiding under all the shouting. And in the end, a lot of this comes back to us. We have to build up our own mental resilience for this new world. For us humans, that means practicing what you might call epistemic humility, which is really just the ability to admit we might be wrong. And for the AI that's shaping our world, it means we have to design systems that show us possibilities, not just one single overly confident and often biased answer. The ultimate goal for all of us is to just get better at being comfortable with uncertainty. So the single unified mirror of reality, it's gone. It's not coming back. And you know what? Maybe that's okay. Maybe losing that old exclusionary consensus opens up a new and better possibility. So the real question for us now is, if we accept that the mirror is shattered for good, what kind of beautiful, complex, and maybe even more truthful mosaic can we build together from all the pieces?